those who are not familiar with our work, the Alliance, our mission is to advance justice and equity and economic growth and land development in the Twin Cities region. With a membership of over 30 community-based organizations and advocacy groups, we build and work with coalitions centered in and led by Black, Indigenous, immigrant, and people of color communities to build power, write our own narratives, and create transformative systemic change that dismantles the historic and ongoing harms of our region's land use and development policies and practices. And so for many years, the Actualizing Equity series has continued to create space for community organizers and aligned stakeholders to build relationships, share knowledge, and strategize together for our work to change the policies and systems that influence racial, economic, environmental, and health equity here in the Twin Cities region. And so we are excited because today we are exploring actualizing equity in small business and economic development. And while we know that BIPOC and immigrant businesses play a vital role in our culture, wealth building, and economic well-being in our communities, in addition to the region as a whole, today we are looking at to define what it means and looks like for BIPOC businesses to thrive on their own terms, how the ecosystem supporting our BIPOC small businesses can prepare itself to ensure that we can withstand another disaster, and how BIPOC businesses can benefit from landscape altering development and infrastructure projects that are happening throughout our region. So with that, welcome, and I'm going to hand it over to Shruthi Kamisetty. She's our coalition organizer for the Business Resource Collective here at the Alliance, and will be your moderator today. So thank you, Shruthi.
Thank you, Juhi. Hi, everyone. I'm Shruthi, as Juhi mentioned, and I'm the coalition organizer for the Business Resource Collective. The Business Resource Collective, or BRC, is a coalition of 20-some organizations, including community development organizations, community development financial institutions, entrepreneurs, and technical assistance focused organizations. So super excited to have a very, very talented and robust panel with us today. On our panel, we have Arun Motilall, owner of Galaxy Foods, Denise Butler, entrepreneur and director of economic and community development at ACER, Juan Bang, artist and economic opportunity director at Springboard for the Arts, Elaine Rasmussen, CEO of Social Impact Now, and then lastly, but not least, Tabitha Montgomery, executive director at Powderhorn Park Neighborhood Association. So really, really excited about this panel. And then I'm going to allow the panel to introduce themselves. Please say your name, title, affiliation, or business with a brief highlight, as well as if you're an entrepreneur yourself. And let's take it from there. And maybe I'll have Elaine start.
Hey everyone, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Elaine Rasmussen. I am an entrepreneur, founder and CEO of Social Impact Now, which is an impact investing, social impact and equitable economic development consulting firm. About 2 or 3 years ago, we were founded in 2016. We've always done as a give back technical assistance, but with 2020 being what it was, the demand tripled. So then we launched a sister philanthropic organization called Connect Up Institute, which is a social finance and enterprise development studio.
Juan, you want to go ahead?
Yes, my name is Juan Bang. I am at Springboard for the Arts, which is a nonprofit organization that's based out of St. Paul. And our mission is to support artists with the tools to make a living and a life, and then to also build just and equitable communities full of meaning, joy, and connection. And then on the other end, I'm also an artist / entrepreneur. My artistry is I'm a fiber artist, so we do a lot of like the traditional cross stitching with a modern twist to it. We incorporate a lot of pop culture in what we do, and then also I do work a little bit with the community by creating social events that would bring a community together, markets and stuff too. And I'm really excited to be part of this panel today because being my background and where I work, really talking about how artists are essential within our community.
Arun, you want to take it away?
Absolutely, thank you. Arun, Motilall, my family owns and operates Galaxy Foods. For those of you who have checked us out before or have not, we're a Caribbean grocer in the Richfield area. Been in the space for 30 odd years. So I spend the vast majority of my time focused on our wholesale business. So restaurants that you guys might frequent that have Caribbean cuisine, that we do have a brick and mortar retail store that a lot of people come and walk in and purchase things. So we've found ourselves more in the community space recently because Richfield is a small neighborhood, fairly tight knit and connected. And we've been trying our best as well to use the real estate that we have to be a place for people to just feel safe and enjoy the things that they want to come and enjoy.
Tabitha.
I guess that leaves me. Hi, everybody. So Tabitha Montgomery, I have the pleasure of serving the Powderhorn Park Neighborhood Association as the executive director for the past 8.5 years now. Time flies when you're having fun. And I have like this amazing privilege to sit at all these tables as no entrepreneur and as not as a business owner, but probably because of the way that neighborhood organizations historically and presently has tried to support holistic, healthy communities, rich, vibrant communities, which certainly include entrepreneurs, right? And certainly includes our small businesses, micro or otherwise. And so it's my pleasure to be a part of this panel today, kind of with that lens in terms of the importance of creating fertile soil and the right ground for businesses and pretty much everything in the community to flourish for the people that they are aiming to serve. So excited to be here.
Denise.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Denise Butler. I am currently the Associate Director / Director of Economic and Community Development at ACER. ACER is African Career Education and Resource, Inc. I'm also an entrepreneur. I have a consulting firm. It's called DHS Healthcare. Started in 2014, just supporting staffing agencies, providing them administrative support. But also have grown that to do more economic and community development work. So I do event planning and entertainment as well, and then invest in real estate. So I'm happy to be here today.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody. And as you can see, we have a very talented panel. So let's get right into it. We're gonna start off with some questions and we'll have an opportunity for the audience to ask questions as well in some sort of open time. So our first question is, the Business Resource Collective, or BRC, talks a lot about the ecosystem for BIPOC entrepreneurs and small businesses, as well as replacing traditional indicators of success for a small business with a healthy business framework. Even in the description for today's panel, we talk about businesses thriving on their own terms. Can you say more about the relevance of these reframes? And how do you work to implement this in your own work? And I will either call on someone, or if folks just want to jump in, happy to do that too. But I really think Tabitha would help us kick off the discussion. I'd love to hear you share.
Yeah. So, guys, I think that, man, the work of building a healthy community turns out is not necessarily easy. And then in my heart of hearts, I don't believe it's hard either, because I think that I would just level set and say, I don't think that I'm going to provide the unicorn point of view today in terms of something that you've not heard. But I really think that this idea of a healthy business ecosystem or businesses thriving on their own terms is rooted in probably what we all believe about how do businesses not only become ready, but what contributes to readiness, and certainly resources contributing to that, whether it be financial resources to be ready to do that which they've named, or the network of resources to do that which they've named, and doing so in what I would call a more honest way in terms of how do you win? How are you successful? I think the lie from the pits of hell is this idea that you need to struggle as an entrepreneur, that you somehow need to prove yourself as an entrepreneur before we finally, as a country, as a society, say, well, there's just some basic things that you need to exist as an entrepreneur, AKA healthcare, AKA pay yourself, AKA being able to have access to legal. That's not necessarily new or novel. It's how Fortune 500 and Fortune 1000s exist, by able to have delineation of roles. And so I think this idea of what is a healthy ecosystem, I think we rob ourselves as community when we don't say up front, the ecosystem demands access to what makes anything well. And that's money, time, and people.
Thank you, Tabitha. Arun, I would love to hear your perspective as a small business owner.
Yeah, absolutely. I find that the term ecosystem is it's such a beautiful term if you look at how we operate from the perspective of we all have a role within it. So what I've come to learn, especially more so recently, as Tabitha said, it's not rocket science. It's nothing novel. It just boils down to like a pure value-driven basis and putting your money where your mouth is, which is that in our space, we are an ecosystem because everybody relies on everybody else. So people don't only look to me or to our family as business owners, we look to customers, we wholesale, and it amazes me how much we buy and sell from everybody, big, small, medium, whoever they are. And the only way we can all work together is if we A, believe that, and B, have the infrastructure and ability to move and work coherently together. And I think that's the part that I'm always amazed by is people think that we compete with many other ethnic businesses, whether it be Indian, Asian, whatever other Caribbean stores, even the traditional super values. But in our own space, we don't actually feel that way. We all call each other for everything. Price checks, we back each other up. We move products between each other when we don't have stuff. And the times that we survive, especially through the pandemic, was when we knew that we could call on each other as a system and be there for everybody. So I think it's a beautiful analogy if you really put it into play. And I found that, like I said, to be very critical during the pandemic because nobody knew what was going to happen. And when you hit those points where your back's up against the wall, it's very quick for all of your boundaries to come down, whether they be race, gender, whatever oriented. You just don't care. You're like, whatever, just give me what you got or I'll give you what I got. It doesn't matter. You're just a human trying to survive. And that philosophy will carry you a long way.
Thank you, Arun. That's very inspiring to hear about that interdependence in the ecosystem for you all. Denise, I'd love to hear your perspective, especially being an entrepreneur yourself.
So I will say for the clients that I work with through ACER and I work with through my consultancy is this somewhat invisible market or not being recognized in the market, especially when even recently a study comes across your way around businesses that have employees from 1 to 5 people in the city of Brooklyn Park. And that study only showed 55, right? And I alone in one building can, show you 100 of those types of businesses, right? And so the idea that the ecosystem recognizes who it wants to recognize and supports who it wants to support is the space that I'm always in as I'm doing this work, right? And so when we talk about the importance of being in community, it's very important because if you're waiting for the ecosystems to address you and give you what you want and provide what it is, you tend to will always remain invisible, and oftentimes maybe just fade away. And so I'm always in this space feeling like not only am I navigating being a business and being here, I'm also trying to always show that I exist. I should be recognized. I should be considered. I should be included in the data. And so your inability to do that is harmful in a way that I'm not giving the resources that everybody should readily have access to and do have access to, right? And I don't think it's only just the people that staff 1,000 employees. I just think that the ecosystem, it has been and it tends to be very alienating, very, inclusive. And so for me, being in my 9 to 5 and even being as an entrepreneur, I'm just always dealing with how important it is to be in community, like Aaron said, with other business owners like myself. And the importance of the community that I do business and I serve, how important it is, because without that, I would not be, as an entrepreneur, be able to survive. And many businesses like myself would not be able to survive. So it's important when we talk about that.
Thank you, Denise. Elaine, Juan, would you like to jump in? And if you don't, that's totally fine.
Anything I would add would be redundant, so I'm good.
Yeah, I think that when we were talking a little bit about like the reframe, I feel like there's just important to remember, like within this reframe, that sometimes artists are small businesses and not always considered small businesses. But when you think about it, they are entrepreneurs, they have a product to sell, and then they also need to get that product out to the marketplace. And then thinking about like what Arun and Tabitha had said too, was like, like that, how do that indicator of like, how do you measure the success of it? And for an artist, I don't think there's like a traditional way for that measurement. But I do find that, creative businesses are often rooted in preserving like cultural traditions. And then they also create neighborhood connections by addressing like social change. So I think that fits into like that new reframe that that you kind of see nowadays.
Thank you, Juan. That's a great way to end and encapsulate the discussion we just had. Artists are definitely entrepreneurs and should be treated as such. So thank you. On to our second question. For everybody, many participants listening to you right now are from government agencies and or communities seeking community anti-displacement strategies. However, it can often feel like small businesses are left out of those conversations. Why do you believe our businesses are so important when it comes to preventing displacement of our communities in the Twin Cities region? What are some essential strategies our local governments and communities can put in place to ensure the resilience and growth of BIPOC businesses, knowing that major investments are being made that can alter our physical landscape? Sorry, long question, happy to repeat. Hope it's descriptive. And go ahead.
Shruthi, can you repeat the last part?
Absolutely.
Where you start with the what?
For sure. What are some essential strategies our local governments and communities can put in place to ensure the resilience and growth of BIPOC businesses while major investments are being made, or if another epidemic or natural disaster were to happen?
So I'd be happy to start, Shruthi. So building off of the points that were made in the first discussion, we have an ecosystem that is very exclusionary and siloed, right? And neither one of those are good, even if they lived in isolation, right? If you don't know how to access things and it's all through relations that you are able to access things, that's a problem. And if people aren't talking to each other and communicating, as Arun was talking about with his co-grocers, that's a problem. So the first thing is that when we recognize and acknowledge that, what I think I can see happening is, one, the ecosystem and all the parts in it need to be really clear about what are they good at? What are they the best at? I think particularly as somebody who's a transplant to this culture, we like to say that we're all things for everybody. And then we do only part of it really, really well, as opposed to digging deep and getting really, really well on a particular thing. For Connect Up, we service a specific kind of entrepreneur at a specific kind of stage, and we are supporting them with back office. We're not trying to do everything. We're trying to provide capital, resources, and networks for businesses that are 3 to 10 years old. That's it, that are led by brown people and rural people. So by being clear, we can build economies of scale and get better and faster and serve more people, as opposed to saying we do all this work and we don't have the impact that we want. I think number two, the thing that we need to do as an ecosystem is build to what actually the data tells us is happening. I think this is, I don't think we're unique in Minnesota, but we like to build things for the possibility instead of what actually exists. So I'll give you an example. We have put a lot of money and resources and energy in wanting to support Black and brown tech founders. How many brown tech founders do we actually have in this state versus all the different types of businesses, the Denises, the Aruns? That is a disproportionate number. But if we look at our resources, we are dedicating about 85% of our resources to tech, with no waterway of STEM programs for those potential tech businesses to come out of. If we don't have STEM programs in K through 12, where are these tech businesses going to come from? What we do know is that Black and brown businesses are typically creative, they're services, they are food related in some way. And so looking at the data, if we're going to be data driven, let's be very data driven, right? And then a couple of other things, and then I'll let my panel, I'll open it up for my panelists, is that building for the least of us. And I think Tabitha talked a little bit about this. When curb cutouts were made, they were made for the people with disability. However, we have all benefited from curb cutouts. If you've ever traveled, you know, you've been grateful for a curb cutout. If you have had to push a baby carriage, you've been grateful for a curb cutout, right? So if we build, I think what happens, we get too locked into the politicization of language and politics, as opposed to let's build to the least of us, the people who have been left on the margins. And by building to that, we automatically serve everybody. And it doesn't have to be a race thing. It doesn't have to be a class thing. But if we build to the folks that are left out, those entrepreneurs with 1 to 5, business owners, the creative artists, if we build to that, we will make it automatically accessible and easier to navigate for everyone.
I think that's great, Elaine. And what I would add is I think that in terms of how municipalities and large institutions can think about what do we do, certainly in the context of some of the things that Elaine just named, what do we do? And sometimes what I've tried to name is that we can decide to start better. We can start to believe that there is actually a way to quantify what does it cost to start well, and to create products that are not patches. And to understand that if you ask me to go mountain climbing and don't send me with rope, chances are people are going to be saying beautiful things at my funeral. If I don't got a pulley and I didn't say I'm going to go mountain climbing, if I don't got no carabiners and I say I'm going to go mountain climbing, I don't got no backpack, I don't got a sleeping bag. And yet we stand back shocked and awed when we can't get businesses, specifically BIPOC businesses, to make it to that 3-year mark, that 5-year mark, that 10-year mark journey, when we know they didn't start well. And so I know it is hard sometimes for us to believe that if we name the number, nobody will fund the number. But you know what? We do ourselves a disservice when we continue with this recipe of not naming the number, and at some point believing how magically we're going to then move the needle by not speaking truth to what it costs to start well. That might mean that at the state level, at the federal level, we need to begin to define and sing in unison that even if you have a farmer's market business, who's going to stand up to ensure that they have $250,000 in the bank from a cash flow perspective to pay themselves, so that they can have insurance, that they can have access to legal, that they're not the only one out there on Saturday morning, depriving themselves of access to their kids, and at some point having a breakdown trying to sell me an onion. These are the things that we need to be able to name. It is that there is actually a number to every sector and to every business to start well. And that doesn't mean that you don't get to see people day in and day out getting it done on less. People of color have always had to figure it out in the lack. And yet we can choose to name the number and declare that we have to figure out the right products and programs in order for people to start well of color, in order for us to determine what do they need at year 3, what do they need at year 5, and not in year 3 and year 5 continue to put them in the numbers of who didn't make it. Because let's just name that now. We're going to continue to follow that trend. Don't wait for 3 years or 5 years. We can just run the numbers now. And everything I just said ain't a mystery. I don't have a secret sauce. What I'm telling you is we have determined everything in this country, and we get what we get, and we shouldn't throw a fit. We have failing business because we won't support them. We have underserved communities of colors because we won't support them. We have policies that don't serve us because we bicker and argue and fight about which constituents are ours and which constituents aren't. We got what we got. We have to lean into different. We all have to look at when we're planning for next year, we have to challenge ourselves to say we're going to do 50% different than what we did last year. Stop looking at your last year plan and only focusing on funding the programs that you had. Have a point of view on what's different.
And can I just want to add on, thank you for all of that, Tabitha. And so going back to the point of like, what can electeds do? What can we do at the state and the local and the federal level? I will just say with this surplus, what I pray and hope for is if I have to choose between direct investment into business and infrastructure, I think that is what needs to happen. And I'll tell you why. It won't matter if that business has started well and you started baking in your kitchen and you've started to grow a business that you didn't even think that you could start, and you start well. But then Target or Hy-Vee come along and they're like, oh, I want 10,000 units. And there is no place for them to produce those units. There is no small to medium-sized co-packer in a 5-state area. The minimums that are required by some of the co-manufacturers are impossible. They are racist because we've had to deal with them on behalf of our folks. So I really hope that electeds take this surplus as an opportunity to build the infrastructure that's needed to have the businesses thrive and survive and thrive again, because it won't matter if they start well, which is very important and totally on board with Tabitha's point. What we also need in infrastructure, and we are uniquely positioned. We have more corporations here, Fortune 500 companies. We have the highest in philanthropy. We have the highest in volunteerism. The only piece that's missing, other than the money direct to support entrepreneurs and ecosystem partners, is the infrastructure to grow. We don't have commercial kitchens. We don't have, artist incubators. We don't have the things that will actually thrive economically thrive in a creative economy. And creative economies are so important. And it's not just about artistry. The movie industry is a creative industry, right? So there are lots of different ways we need to broaden our thinking about what we think about. To Juan's point of like, who is a business? What is a business? If you are selling something and taking in money, you are in business. Full stop, right? And so I think there's some language that we get conditioned to think, and it's in our political rhetoric of like, you're only a business if you get to this point. And then that makes people opt out, whether it's knowingly or unknowingly. And then that just is a disservice to us as a community, as a culture, as a universe.
Yeah, I'll jump in now. Elena and Tabitha, those are great ideas, which is why I'm going to step in now, because I feel like I can piggyback off your path that you've built there. To answer one of the questions, I feel that I have felt that businesses like ours, as well as, let's take the example of salons, barbershops, or nail salons or hair salons, any of these smaller places that you go to, they're like a thread that holds the tapestry of like a garment together, right? It gets forgotten sometimes, but it's absolutely necessary. And that's where I think that it's important that we pay attention. And specifically, if I had an ask, I would say it's always come in and talk with us. People fail, I think they do, be generalizing, but you'd be amazed as if you walk into a small business like any that I listed, or ourselves as a official or a leader within a community, and ask a question. I'm pretty confident that I could tell you what most of the people within a small radius need, want, or desire, versus having to struggle to figure that out on your own. And people tell us things that you would be amazed at, kind of like the barbershop conversations. Like, I know so much about people, it appalls me, actually, that they come into the store and they're picking something up and they'll tell you about their divorce, their separation, whatever, their kids' problems, as if you can help. And in most times it's just therapy, but you'd be surprised how many times I want to say, hey, man, I wish I could send you somewhere, but I don't really know exactly what resources are local or available, or who you should talk to that would be a great person to then connect you. So people to help and willing, and we know our role within the community. So having the resources and access to things helps. Additionally, when PPP was coming out and you know, the world was coming to an end, it was very fast for money to move and ask questions and figure it out later. I realize that economically, that's not a policy that can always be implemented, but if your initiatives are really to make an impact, it was amazing how impactful that money was for ourselves and for everybody in our community. I know that we were able to keep people on payroll. We were able to stop people from being stressed. So my point to that is removing some of the red tape that's sometimes required and necessary to accomplish certain grants or financial obligations. Access to healthcare as an entrepreneur or a small business is really good. It helps when I know I don't need to worry about that. I came from Target Corporation. My biggest fear, or my family's biggest fear when I left Target to be here, was what's your healthcare situation going to be? How are you going to figure that out? If that wasn't there, it wouldn't trip a lot of people up. So I think those types of programs and incubators and spaces where people can feel like their job is to be there and think and work and not have to worry about some of the bigger things really does instigate the type of creativity and dynamic environment that we talk about that we want. So yeah, those are some of my thoughts for that perspective.
I would love to kind of follow up on that too, because I think that as I'm in my role, I'm constantly trying to connect with who is in our neighborhood in St. Paul, which ends up being, you know, Midway, Frogtown, Rondo a lot, and trying to find out, learn the stories. And I love, like Arun was saying, like hearing the stories of all these individuals, whether they're small businesses, artists, and you know, just trying to figure, and we all kind of know like what it is to help them, what they want in order to survive and to survive their business. And you know, but like trying to figure out like what the best route is, and then how to also be able to like avoid that, you know, what epidemic or natural disaster that could happen to us in the future. One thing that you know, like Springboard, we recently relaunched again was something called the Guaranteed Minimum Income Program that we have. It's randomized, so it wasn't any application process that we did, but we selected 75 artists, culture bearers, creative workers, and what we did was we supplemented them $500 for 18 months. And what we wanted to do with this is kind of see where, like, if we could take a little bit of an ease off of you know, that of like what they would want or what they need. Like, how can they take their artistry further? You know, like if they didn't have to worry about, you know, paying rent or buying groceries or stuff. So it was like, it's just, but it's not, I don't want to call it a Band-Aid, but it's something little to support them for 18 months. But in return, right now, I'm trying to make sure that I also allow them to get resources and get support in some way, because we want to be able to help them in the long run after the 18 months. Like what else can they do with it? You know, can they, if they become a little bit more financially stable, like would they know about real estate or any other, you know, aspect of it, and along help them with some benefits, whether it's medical or stuff too. So and that's what that guaranteed income is. And it's excellent program. And also, like I said, in that time, I've got connected to so many individuals and so many people who, you know, and just hearing stories of artists and the community has been like, it's been amazing to know what we could do in the future to help others.
Shruthi, can I say one more thing before we move on this? Thank you, because I think that just inspired from the conversation. And I know that there's a range of people in this call and who will listen. And I do want to give another practical example, because I love everything Elaine said about, you know, the infrastructure needing to be there. Certainly it's not going to help if we start well and the infrastructure is not there. But just hang with me, people. Here's what I believe. When businesses of color start well, then we might begin to look like our majority businesses who have always started well, who can then put positive pressure on legislators to create policies and programs that benefit them more deeply. One of these examples is the Real Estate Investment Trust. Eisenhower didn't do that just out of the goodness of his heart to allow investors to do basically collusion. So here we have our brother saying, hey, during the deepest of time, we have to work together and partner together to move product, to stand in the gap, to support each other. What happens when legislators and civil servants actually answer the question, what happens when we create programs to serve micro and small businesses that mirror programs that we already have in place that serve Fortune 500s? Let us collude. Give me back office support for cooperatives. Help it be easier for us to pool our money and to raise our voice and to apply positive pressure on what you pass in my community. That is practical, tactical, and actionable. So if you don't have new ideas, you don't have to have a new idea, just go rob a policy that already benefits the larger institutions and give that to me.
All has been said, and you know, my spirit is just pushing me, and I know it's not an alien situation or isolated situation as an organization I'm dealing with right now. And so I'm just going to put it into this environment right now. When in the midst of a contract given to you by government entity, you find that it is not working the way that you need it to work for your community. You're not asking for more money. You're just asking for the money to do what you know you've always known that it needs to do and what you need to do. And then you're told, well, we accept that it needs to do that, but let's wait for the next RFP round. And so instead of me being equipped to be able to serve maybe 20 people, a whole bunch of different things, you want me to be able to do one thing for 500 people, and you find that more valuable, right? And so we provide technical assistance, and there was funding out there to support our organization to provide technical assistance, let's say for 20 different types of services. But you decide we're going to contract you for one type of service. And we have a community that no matter if organization A is doing it and organization C may be offering what I can't offer, they still want to come to me. And so they're being told, well, unfortunately, we can't pay them. Their contract doesn't say that they can offer you those services. So go and find somebody else that can offer you that services, and then we'll pay for it. And you're seeing that I'm not able to use the money the way in which I want to use it. And I'm being penalized for that. But I'm telling you, I didn't ask you for more money. I just said, just make my scope of work more flexible so that I can continue to best serve my business. Don't make my businesses have to go and figure out how to navigate the ecosystem even more, build new relationships just to receive what I can readily provide them if I was equipped to do so. And that is my frustration. At oftentimes we are at the table. Yes, we are. We are involved in the conversation. We are there helping you and supporting you to create the product. But once for some reason between you leaving the meeting with us and going back and creating the product, everything we have provided you gets lost. And you still end up creating a cake that I do not care for, that I will never eat. It has none of the ingredients that I asked you for. It looks nothing like what we designed or talked about. But you're happy because you were able to create a cake. That is some of the most frustrating part about the ecosystem.
Thank you, Denise. We're going to go on to our next question. Elaine kind of touched on this with regards to the $17.6 billion surplus that we have in Minnesota. But I would love to ask our panelists, how would you prioritize spending that $17.6 billion surplus in the BIPOC small business ecosystem? And how do you think DEED and local government agencies can ensure that those dollars actually reach our businesses? Big question, probably a lot of thoughts.
I'll start. So I'm a big fan of kind of build it and they will come philosophy. So to be specific with this kind of money, and in our neighborhood or neighborhoods that I've serviced, I think things like large, better roads, bike paths, sidewalks, lighting at night, you know, an environment that's inviting. So now if I were to drill that down and say why, we're in a neighborhood, not off like a main corridor, which is why we're kind of our own oasis. So people, if it's bright, if it's well manicured, all of those things, or access to money for landscapes and the roads are nice, people feel invited to come and explore. They feel safe. Those are the types of things that I would assume we're trying to create all of that, but we're privately funding all of that. And of course, you only have so much money. So we kind of draw some lines at what's the business owner's responsibility. You know, I can't put up street lights or bus stops for the kids that stand out here in minus 22 degrees to get on the bus. So I keep thinking to myself, how, if money can make it an environment where everything can blossom, naturally, I will blossom as well. I am not concerned about the money coming into my hands, because I know that if it benefits those around me and I just here, there will be a trickle down effect, and you know, just the beauty of living in a place that's comfortable and feels great. So I think some of those types of infrastructure projects are very important. We have great bike lanes in the city, and they've been very your dog, a greater increase in community, a greater increase in people just riding by and stopping in and or going down to the barber shop. It's become more local, but just really good. And one of the things that we've been talking about most recently is crime at night. The number one thing to reduce crime is just lighting. It's simple, and if you have proper street lights, proper floodlights, you have police patrolling somewhat sporadically, but yet in some kind of system, people will be deterred naturally. And so I think that all of that, the rest of it just kind of falls into place, in my opinion. So money being used on those types of things, fiber optics, access to Wi-Fi, you can never go wrong with that stuff. So that's my 2 cents there.
Tabitha, you look like you were going to come off mic. No. So going back to what Ms. Tabitha said about naming the number, and I think someone from the Alliance team put up our investment package ask that we put together about a year ago, and that number is still low, right? I think we grossly underestimated that number. It probably needs to be twice that, but we'll start there. And so that's that, naming the number, because then you can't, it becomes the conversation moves differently, right? Then if you're not going to give me this, what are you going to give me? And it gives you this barometer to demonstrate that, oh, you're going to give me 1/10 of what I asked for. And what is it you expect me to do? Right? By having the number, it allows you naturally to have some sort of accountability, or at least some very clarity on what you're not going to do, right? You've told me what you're not going to do by coming back to me with a ridiculous offer, right? The other thing that I will offer up is going back to what can folks do from an ecosystem perspective. I think we need to, entrepreneurship should be a curriculum in K through 12. And I say that not because everybody should become an entrepreneur, but this is good for business. This is good for communities, to get people and get young people from very early ages, because I think some of that gets stomped out of them. In communities of color, you start with that. You know everybody, you know somebody, if not more than one person who owns a business, right? But somehow that light gets dimmed over in school. So entrepreneurship creates, for those who don't go become entrepreneurs, creates entrepreneurship, which is good for industry. We are falling behind even in industry in every indicator, right? So we have folks that are not coming in with creative ideas. We have folks that are not coming in and thinking about how can they look at the organization and be entrepreneurial to move that organization to be greater if they choose not to be an entrepreneur. So entrepreneurship and the notion of entrepreneurship benefits everybody, everybody. The last thing I will say is that I think every single department, and we've actually outlined this as the BRC, every single department has a responsibility to contributing to a healthy business framework. Here's one example. When you are only allowed to have no more than $2,000 in your bank account before you get kicked off of any sort of assistance. I don't know about you, but I couldn't live if I only had $2,000 in the bank. So then you have people who are operating illegally, right? Operating a business, which is not contributing to the tax base, which some of our friends are concerned about. They're not able to access these funds because they haven't been legitimized by registration, which leaves money on the table for other people to take that don't need it and don't deserve it, right? So things like shifting and changing bank account minimums, shifting and changing the things that we know that actually diminish the light of entrepreneurship, because much of this entrepreneurship comes from people who are without. They are, as Denise said, you are building something because you did not have the opportunity. You are building something because there's not something there. Look at Shea Moisture and these big companies. I could not find a skin product for me, so I created one. I could not find a shampoo for me, so I created one. I couldn't find my kind of food for my community, so I created a grocer, right? So that all has to be supported, not by just deed. Every single department in the state has a role in creating a healthy business framework and figuring out what are those things that your department needs to do. The Department of Human Health Services, the Department of Education, every single department has a role, and figuring those out will then start to really create a cohesive governmental ecosystem.
Thank you, Elaine. Tabitha?
I definitely am appreciative to all of the partners and thought leadership that has gone into the BRC infrastructure or investment package, specifically naming those 4 core buckets in terms of corridor redevelopment. And sometimes, legislators hear that and because we specifically name, and as we should, given the communities we represent, cultural corridors within the city of Minneapolis and St. Paul that were materially affected after the uprising for Mr. Floyd's murder. But we don't discount the value of main streets across this state, right? So I appreciate the duality of the way that the BRC investment package is laid out, in addition to infrastructure. What I appreciate about the infrastructure note is that it specifically talks about investment in cooperative models, right? The ability for us in community to own together, to lead together, to serve and be well together. I like the idea when we talk about, when we talk about the investment number, the direct investment, we like, Cash in hand, we all know is important, but specifically flexible and patient capital. Don't be in a hurry to be the last one in, municipalities. Be the first one in and show up with some oomph, because this is how we win. And then again, not discounting the tried and true. So that it's almost like an 80-20 model. Basically do 80% different and 20% the same. We need technical assistance. We need to enrich the programs that are already serving many small businesses and micro businesses today. But we can't be bound by existing definitions and existing practices that continues to produce the same dry cake that Denise was mentioning before, that don't nobody want. Don't nobody want your dry vanilla cake. We said we wanted red velvet. So where is the red velvet? And when are we going to get it? I mean, this is the type of thing that we have to be collectively willing to name. It's not just big numbers, because I have an appreciation, I think, as we all do, that this state has many needs. But let me just encourage us all to think about this. I know there's a lot of swirl right now in this particular legislative session. There's a lot of energy about this current surplus, this $17.5 billion surplus. But I ask you this, does anybody think that we're in a poor state? Does anybody think that we're not going to have another surplus? Does anybody think that the state of Minnesota is not doing well? Does anybody think that we should still be running neck and neck with Mississippi when it comes to some of the deepest disparities in this country? I'll wait. So even when we have a surplus, when we run neck and neck with Mississippi would suggest we need to do something different. We can't be professing that, oh, look at us, we about to make these deep investments and we got the same type of achievement gaps. We got the same type of problems with equitable or inequitable development. We got all the worst air pollution in all the brown communities. We can't somehow figure out holistic and restorative forms of safety. We can't be that great when we got all these issues.
Especially when with January 16th, and the governor says, I'm focusing on Black wealth. And I look at the current bills, how? How are you focusing on Black wealth? Nothing against the county, but don't be a legislative person and tell me, say, oh, I'm investing in Hennepin County's ability to make their procurement or their contracting offers more flexible. You're investing in Hennepin County, providing them more staff who will get paid 6 figures, because now it's some new position you're investing in, will get paid 6 figures now. They'll bring in a team that's probably going to be occupying millions and millions of dollars for this new department. That's you investing in them to sit down for the next 5 years and see how their procurement can come together to be more flexible. And then eventually, you know, what did he call it? DBEs, disadvantaged business or enterprises. Now, 5 years later, will be able to have access to some of those procurement opportunities. Miss me with that. I'm looking at this legislative bills out there, and that's every time you talk about putting money into minority communities, it's always you build some new office, some new program where you're going to have white staff coming in making 6-figure salaries. I'm sorry. Doing and producing the same tired products. I am all for putting those cash, the Walsh checks. I welcome the Walsh checks. The problem people have with giving poor people money, I don't understand. You think they're poor because they don't know how to manage money? No, you're wrong. They're the best money managers. They manage to do a lot with such little. In the pandemic, we decreased the poverty. Poverty went down in the midst of a pandemic. Why? We were making sure that families had more money in their households to feed each other than ever before. So this problem we have with giving poor people money and thinking that we need to create some new office or new program and channel the money through them to help poor people manage the $50 that they have. They've been managing the $50. People need more money in their homes. It's just that simple. Give them more money, livable wages, higher income. Let them be comfortable first and foremost. And then you will see how more creative they are because they're healthy, how more productive they are because they're healthy, how much more they take care of their streets because it has better lighting. It looks better. There are not so many cracks, you know. They're not in their wheelchairs or their walkers, like stumbling over all these broken sidewalks. I don't want you to defund the police, but before the police gets there, let me live in a lit up, nice, vibrant place and love that space that I want to protect it with my every being. I don't need the police. I'm going to be watching out my beautiful window, my grass. I'll be out there mowing it because it is growing. I will be the police in my community if I feel safer being outside my house, sitting outside my house. So this idea, the $17.6 billion, put it directly in people's homes. I am all for that. That's what I would recommend government to do. Guaranteed income, it works, it's good.
And I just want to add on to that. Thank you, Denise. And I'm going to say something that may be controversial. Some people aren't going to like it. So I'm going to say that knowing that. Also, when reviewing the budget, and we see the same folks, same organizations getting big pots of money that are representing or servicing brown people, and sometimes these are led by brown people, that are not being held accountable. They are taking the money and they are not making any change. They are not making any impact, but they are the ones because they have a government relations team. They are the ones because they have the bigger capacity because they've been doing it so long. So an organization like mine or like some of my other colleagues, it's like, so I asked one of them, I said, so when have you ever written in another organization in your appropriation? Have you ever added another Black-led organization? This is to a Black organization. Have you ever, I said, but everybody wants to talk about how we need more of us, but what are you doing to help there be more of us? And so what I think accountability is super important. And I'm not saying that there shouldn't be appropriations. That is not what I'm saying. I'm saying that if you funded, this goes back to, I think, something Tabitha said, if you keep funding the same people to do the same garbage, and then you wonder why nothing has really changed in your constituency or in the community, well, I can't help you. Everybody needs to, you want to hold poor people more accountable than the people that are actually getting all the money. Demonstrate to me how you've been in existence for 20 years and how the community has changed as a result of the work you've done. Oh, you can't. Right? So then don't give them more money. Or if you the master of legislative languages, hey, people know how to cut out certain size businesses in legislation, sort out certain organizations or tell them that they have to collaborate. They have to bring on another organization or just give that money to another organization. As Tabitha said, try something new. Try a new organization, give them a shot and see what they do.
Listen, sis, I love all that. And I'm not disputing any of it. I just want to, for the record, so that people in this call don't go out in the streets talking about Tabitha has said or call some Black organization trash. I don't know exactly how you said it. I just want people to understand that's not exactly. But I understand that the sentiment in terms of how do we not only expect accountability, but demonstrate accountability for the outcomes that we want. That is powerful. That is true. I fully in agreement with that. And I think that, you know, this idea about the money and where should the money go? And so many things that Denise mentioned in terms of just give the money to the people. It warms my heart and not necessarily put it into all the infrastructure and the engineering that we often are determined to do because we don't trust each other with the money that I think that sometimes we actually know that we need to live and exist. And so there's so many deep implications to this thread continuing potentially in different forums so that we really figure out what are we able to do in community. And yet I do want to say this in terms of when we think about investment, right? When we think about trying to move the needle in some way, I would often encourage us to really ask ourselves, do we need a new data point? I wish, like in the pandemic, when we couldn't move around that much, or even in the past few days with this snowstorm, that there was a moratorium on insight collection. Because just when you need to construct a new department and to give whomever that six-figure salary, they inevitably are calling me to sit in again on some group, some cohort, some coalition over a series or cycle of points of engagement. I want to give y'all that word back, by the way. You can have engagement because we have so corrupted it. But this idea that we don't have enough insight and data to make an informed decision about how to cultivate and curate the communities that we claim that we need is, again, another lie from the pits of hell. There is no more data to collect. You need not talk to me one more time. I would ask you to go back to any study at this point done in the 80s and actually activate against any recommendation named there. Sometimes what we fail to do is to really do the hard work of determining, did we ever fund and implement any of the recommendations that we've gotten over the past 2 decades from brown people? I can answer you, no. So when you keep showing up, asking me for more input, asking me for more ideas, I gotta insist, this is the game we play of redundancy. This is the game we play that we now are demonstrating that we're willing to do work without having to do work, without having to do one thing differently when it comes to the core structural things that my generations ago have named, that my grandmama named, that my great-grandmama named. You already know what we need to do. And sometimes I think we hide behind data collection as a proxy to say, I've given you my answer. This is who I am. You understand that these are these United States. You don't got me twisted. You know my profile. I am resistant to change. The AI is a lie. I am actively working against you because the people that are benefiting from the way that it is designed is exactly in the place that I want them to be. So that's just a way of saying it. Let's stop with the false hope. Either we're going to be different or we're not. But you don't need to convene me one more time to get my hopes up, only for the bottom to fall out.
Thank you, Tabitha. Arun, would you like to briefly respond, maybe in a couple minutes? Because we will be going on to questions. If you don't want to, totally fine.
I don't have anything additional to add on that point.
Great. Juan, do you have anything you'd like to share?
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of like tag on to a few of the things that I heard. I mean, like, I think really just like, along with investing in people, it's really also investing in like micro entrepreneurs, stopping some of those like barriers that could also happen to them, you know, like either moving in the path of like more like grants, forgivable loans for like micro businesses that has, you know, that might already have that low barrier, that, you know, or else like trusting that micro entrepreneur that they know what they need to get to that next step, that next level, and then supporting them with like that actual capital so that they can move on. They're part of the community. And so that, you know, so as everyone was talking, that was like, oh yeah, that's like, those micro entrepreneurs are really critical for our community, and they are that business that, you know, that need that support too. So
Thank you, Juan. Now we're going to kind of briefly touch on some questions from people. We have approximately a little less than 10 minutes for that. We do have one question in the chat from Wyndham Park Citizens in Action. And panelists, the question is, for those that have found a healthy ecosystem to work in or have created one, what indicators of health are important?
Sorry, what was the last? What indicators of what?
Health.
Health?
Health. H-E-A-L-T-H. Tabitha, would you like to? Or
Are they referring to as if their mental health is better now because of the ecosystem that they're in? Their physical health now is better because of the ecosystem that they're in?
great question. Wyndham Park Citizens in Action. Would you like to maybe elaborate?
Yeah, thank you for taking the question. I think a little bit more simple than it might have come across to just what systems are working, and what elements provide a sense that it is working. What positive feedback loops are people witnessing?
So I will share just some, they did a universal basic income with 24 Black single mothers down in, I want to say Mississippi. And while I don't know all the data around the health indicators, what was clear after they had gone through, I believe it was, I can't remember if it was 12 or 24 months, I think it's 12 months of $1,000, that the women were smiling more than when they first started. The women they were lighter in their step because they were able to pay off some student loans, some outstanding medical bills that were plaguing them, right? I think, there's an organization, Robert Wood Johnson, they're working on some of these questions. What are the things that we should be measuring? But I think there's nothing better than your experience changing. When you see when your experience in a community changes. So like Arun was talking about, when your place is lit up at night, you now have a different experience of that place, which then has exponential benefits. There's a relief of your brain that you are safe. There is a relief in your heart to bring your children. There's a relief in your heart that then has physiological implications, positive physiological implications. So while I don't have a specific answer of like, what's the box, right? What's the indicator? I think there's no better indicator than the feeling that you have and that it's different. The visuals that you see are different. That tells you in and of itself, without any data, that something has changed for the better or the worse.
And maybe I'll just add to that, to Tabitha's point, that maybe we don't need another specific data point on it. It's maybe more anecdotal, to your point, Elaine.
Well, I just want to jump in and say again, because I probably would not be a good board member if I didn't bring up an example of the Midtown Global Market, right? Like somebody could shade me for saying, well, they was asked you, it's a good example of an ecosystem. I really do want to say that seriously. So for me, when I think about not sending people to do this alone, is when I think about a good ecosystem. When you've not asked the entrepreneur to be the visionary, to be the bookkeeper, to be the social media guru, to be the influencer, to be the janitor, to be the CPA, when you've not sent them alone. And oftentimes in the Midtown Global Market board meetings, we've had some businesses that have been there since inception, Manny Tortas, for instance. And you can just hear in their own words what it means to have had such wraparound support from an institution where they've not had to figure out the build out alone, where they've not had to drive the traffic alone, where that when traffic is low, they're not the only one needing to figure it out. So I think that Midtown Global Market made food halls cool before food halls made a comeback from a cafeteria. Do we understand what I'm saying? So there is real truth to just when we look out in the world, I'm cool with us not necessarily being the most innovative. Generally, innovation is recycled ideas packaged in a new way. We've given it a different dress, and I'm good with that. Some of what I'm naming, and I think what the BRC has tried to put forward in terms of an ecosystem, an invest, it's really saying, really what happens when we don't send people alone? And when we don't send not only people alone, but into a complicated web of 26 different departments to figure out the marketing and to figure out the logistics and to figure out, the janitorial services need. When all of that is in-house, and then when things are going sideways, you still got a whole other executive team focused on how do we still support the missional aims of the market, where we don't have to raise costs per square feet, where we don't then just tell people we're not worried about the fact that you got product on the back dock and you're short staffed today, so we don't know how it's going to get to. You see what I'm saying? the power, and this is where I think a lot of cultural communities have often named, this is where how we've always tried to navigate and operate, but there's not always the best programs to support the flexibility of how we want to support each other.
Arun, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, absolutely. I think Elaine, your response was fantastic because that's what I was going to say. So I'm going to kind of just reiterate and kind of drive home the importance of people understanding that anywhere that you go, if you travel and have the opportunity to leave the country or even just the state, and you just see people lighter and smiling, that is the metric that matters. And an example that I've experienced personally is I had the chance to go to Cuba a few years ago. And one of the things that I noticed is my entire life being educated here, I was fed a narrative about Cuba. And then once I got there, I noticed three things actually that were very different. One, and I didn't realize it until I came back and people started asking me. One is there are no like lame looking dogs around. Everything is like well fed, even the animals. They're always cared for. There are no people begging for food or asking for money, at least in the corridors that I was in. And everybody seems to be pursuing something. And a lot of that, when I asked why that is, people say, well, you know, most of our basic food needs are already provided for because we are a social society, which gives at least enough people to make something. And there is a sense of community that is created there and that everybody is looking out for each other as much as they possibly can. And I think that when you lift that weight off the shoulder, it kind of goes to what Elaine was saying, where people walk lighter. They really do, because they do feel like a weight has been removed from them. And that is, I think, what all of us are striving for as entrepreneurs, as the heads of organizations, or even within our families. If we're just responsible for running a family household, we want everybody within there to be the best they can be. And to do that, our job is to bear some of that weight for them. And I think that that's financial, emotional, whatever it is that's needed from them or for them at that time. So I push us to, not work so hard. It's not really that complicated. I think we get lost in the data, as we say, we get lost in the numbers and the technology. And at the end of the day, it's all very simple. Relationships, you know, everybody's buying and selling, and we're just trying to eat, live in safety, Maslow's hierarchy, right? And then naturally you kind of climb your way up that pyramid. But until you take care of the basics, the rest doesn't matter.
How dare you call that word socialist, right? Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
Americans cringe.
People should be.
Oh
yeah.
my God. You know, and you use that word so caringly, right? Just now. I hope we process that. And what he painted, did it sound the least bad at all? You know, to saying that people had their basic needs met, were walking around smiling, nobody looked hungry, not even the dogs. And he said all of that. He painted that picture for us and used this word that we cringe, right? We don't want to look at the fact that we've lived in a capitalist society that has not been successful, right? So what's wrong with saying it didn't work? Let's do something differently. I think that's the problem with America. God forbid we say it didn't work. Now let's do something different. And with any system you're in, any office you're working in, any organization you're at, where do we be able to say safely? And that's what I like about the space that we're in, BRC, even the Alliance providing this platform. We're being very vocal about naming what doesn't work, and we're saying it with jokes and smiles on our faces. That says a lot for how far we've come. So, you know, back to your question about what are some of the indicators? that we're in this space today, having this long of a conversation. Everybody is in the space. They're nowhere else. And we're smiling and we're throwing jokes. Not all of it is jokes, but just we're comfortable. I think that's the indicators we want to have in every conversation as we leave here today. In any system you're working in any office you're working in, it hasn't worked. It didn't work. Now what can we do differently?
Any other comments from panelists? Great. Well, we don't have any more time for questions, unfortunately, but I'm really glad that this question was answered, and I love the emphasis on anecdotal and qualitative, because I think that's really what it's about, and as well as the very many ways that we can create healthy communities and therefore healthy business. So on to our last question. Given today's discussion and the work you do in community and or experience as an entrepreneur in this ecosystem, what is one key takeaway you would like everyone to leave with today? And one thing an individual, government employee, lender, or elected leader can do to ensure resiliency of our BIPOC small business landscape. Was that clear?
Yeah, definitely. I can start. Slow down, take the time to have conversation, be patient with yourself, realize that change doesn't happen tomorrow. I think, just really believe in what it is that you want to do, and dig into it, and don't get caught up in the hustle and the pace of it all. I think not only will you hopefully feel some level of zen for yourself, but I think also you will feel like your impact is different, because it is one thing to make an impact, and it's another thing to make an impact, if you know what I mean. I had one conversation with one person that made me feel like I felt great and they felt great, versus having, standing at the front of a podium and narrating to 800 people. I could have less value, and so could those that are in that audience, than that one-on-one conversation. Sometimes we try to swing for home runs all the time, and that's not how games are won, right? So look at it from a sports analogy. It's just very fundamental. I find that it's also more impactful in how much it feels that you're trying to help those people that you're talking with, even if you're not able to help them. The situations and conversations that I've had, I was like, man, that person really tried, and I can't fault them for anything else, and that's important to me.
Shruthi, I could go next too. So I think that a takeaway for being in my role and what I do, that individuals, people have to remember that to invest in artists, because artists are essential for our community, because they support, they celebrate, they develop creative practices, cultural traditions, and and there's such a wide range of artists. It's could be anyone from makers to storytellers, creative thinkers, change agents. They're key contributors to healthy and equitable communities. So, that's why they're so important. And, we want to ensure that artists within our community who's giving back to the community are compensated for the work that they do too. So that would be my takeaway.
And maybe Shruthi, if I could just, and I apologize, could you just repeat the question one more time?
Absolutely. So the question is, given today's discussion and the work you do in community and or experience as an entrepreneur in this ecosystem, What is one key takeaway you would like everyone to leave with today?
Got it. I'll jump in. So guys, there's sometimes I may feel like I get animated and a lot of my comments was directed toward what other people need to do. But I want you to know I fully believe that the world that I want to see requires as much of me to change as the systems that I've named. And I think in terms of in community, the neighborhood organization that I serve is an example of that. I 100% believe that that is one way to do things. And yet PP&A is currently at the table with 9 other neighborhood organizations, putting together a framework and a plan for us to figure out what could another way look like. No decisions have been made. Please do not report that there is any type of change coming in the near future. But the spirit of that conversation has nothing to do about what someone else needs to do, nothing to do about what another funder needs to do. What are we willing to do? Sometimes we're not willing to name that we're not ready. Sometimes we're not willing to name that we should sunset some nonprofits. Sometimes we're not willing to name that we're not ready for collaboration. Sometimes we're not willing to say that, hey, I'm willing to sit at this table with other community partners, but not do one stitch of work. That don't help. I'm willing to be associated. I'm willing to have my logo plastered on that thing, but I don't have no capacity, no extra energy, no time to help you pull the weight. See, the change that we've been talking about isn't just for elected leaders to figure out, isn't just for civil servants to figure out, isn't just for moneyed folks to figure it out. I think that there's a powerful question in the chat related to power, which in many ways is the definition of racism, not bigotry, not division, but who has the power and systematically how they got it. But the way that we unwind all of that is to redefine not only what power is, but what success is. Right now, we believe they got it, but what happens when we say we have it? That's a mindset shift. Because I tell you what, I think some of my people are ready for the zombies. When you ain't never really had a lot, you adapt differently. You flex differently. We can decide that.
I'll just say, as an entrepreneur and all my other fellow entrepreneurs on here, we need to realize what we don't know and hold ourselves accountable in trying to educate ourselves about what we don't know. Don't assume because I'm in this field and I have great relationships that, I'm doing everything right when it comes to being an entrepreneur. There's so much I still do not have in place, right? And even as much as I am wearing the hat in the ecosystem as a 9-to-5 profession, wearing that entrepreneur hat, there's still so much that I don't know. And I think we don't like to take responsibility for the fact that we don't know things, or we may fear going out to figure things out or finding folks that we can figure things out with. We should prioritize networking and collaborating with folks. Stop seeing other businesses. They can do the same thing I do. They can sell the same product I sell. The market is enough for all of us to exist. I don't want you to see you as my competition. See people as your partner, because you're missing out on probably a wealth of information you could give each other by seeing each other as competition. So, for my entrepreneurs, know what you don't know and hold yourself accountable to go figure that out. And I think I would say that the same way, even in the work that I do, as I work with business clients and I offer technical assistance, there's so many of them that don't come and take advantage of it because that unknown, their fears, they're embarrassed about it, and they're scared to say, I've been in this game for 15 years, but there's still so much I don't know or I'm not doing. So don't let that prevent you from growing as a business owner because you're embarrassed about what you don't know.
I'll go next. So 2 things, one to piggyback off of Denise, and that is capitalism exponentially drove marketplace, but somehow everybody only wants there to be one person doing something, right? To Denise's point, when I first started doing the work I was doing, everyone said to me, well, isn't Mita already doing that? And I was like, and? First of all, they're not, but even if that were true, can there only be one organization that's serving businesses of color doing technical assistance work? I didn't know that there was a rule, right? I didn't know, really, I didn't get the memo. So I think it's a subconscious thing. It's so embedded in our culture that there can only be one of us doing the one thing that they know us for, right? And we are multidimensional. We don't just do one thing. So don't just pigeonhole when you see us in one thing and that become the panacea. We are capable of participating in other conversations, doing other things. And so that's important. And then the last thing I will say is that I think the earlier point, and when I say we, I mean Minnesota, we are not as good as we think we are. We are not. However, we have everything we need to be better and make meaningful and substantive change for Minnesota so that your outcomes are not determined by your zip code.
Thank you, everyone. Very, very inspiring last comments. I'm definitely mulling over everything. We are a little, couple minutes past time. And as much as I would love to keep this conversation going, I know it's indicative that we will only have to have more of convenings like this. So thanks everybody for making time on your Friday afternoon to join us for this very profound Actualizing Equity event. I thoroughly enjoyed myself, and in my role at the Alliance, I'm grateful to be learning from the likes of folks on our panel. So again, thank you. And I think we're gonna have to close. So have a lovely weekend.
Everybody, yeah, enjoy your weekend. Thank you.
Take care.